Welcome once again to the open mic, Writers in Their Own Words, where every show I talk to writers about their work, the publishing industry, and how they do what they do. The show is available by the same name on both YouTube and via all of the major podcast platforms. And you can subscribe to either or to both, so you never miss a thing. I, of course, recommend that you subscribe to both. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you do, be kind enough to leave me a nice review, preferably something with 5 stars attached to it or a big thumbs up. It really does help other people find the show. I'll come back and remind you of that before we leave again. But I want to jump right into it today because my guest is an old friend of the show who is making, I believe, his third appearance here on the open mic, either back from the blog days or now in the modern video and podcast era. And there's a reason for that, of course, and that is because Jim Latwell just keeps writing really good crime thrillers. So I always want to have him back on to talk about his work. He's here today because he wants to share some insights with his fellow writers, which is another thing that Jim has always been very gracious with his time and with his knowledge of the industry. So yeah, really thrilled to have him here to talk about the new book, Face of Greed, which is the first in a new series featuring Detective Emily Hunter and her partner, Javier Medina. We're going to get into that as well as the latest and greatest from the world of publishing here in just a moment. But I'll take just a moment and say, Jim, always a pleasure to have you on the open mic. How are you doing today?
Good, Rich. Hey, thanks for having me back. I appreciate you letting me darken your doors one more time.
Well, hey, if everybody darkened my door the way you do, then it would all be good. That's for sure. Well, yeah, let's talk about the new book. I'm reading Face of Greed right now, and it is
Hmm.
most definitely another stellar outing from you. Please tell the audience all about it.
Well, thanks. No, I'm glad to hear you're liking the journey so far. Yeah. Face of Greed is a new series, first in a new series. See, there's the great cover that
Yes.
Ocean View.
I got to tell you, folks, this is why you should watch the YouTube show, because if you don't know what we're talking about, Jim just held up his book, and that's awesome because that's a great cover too. I love that cover.
Really is a good cover. I'll just do it one more time because Ocean View publishers did a great job putting this book together. It looks great. They made me sound good, so they're aces in my book. But yeah, Face of Greed is a new series, and we're meeting Detective Emily Hunter for the first time. And the book is set in Sacramento, so we're seeing some of the familiar landscape and landmarks that Sacramento is, and a little bit of peek behind the covers of what Sacramento doesn't really want people to know. It's not really a love letter to Sacramento. It's more of kind of a peeling back of the city that's been kind of trying to reinvent itself for the last 50 years and never quite sticks the landing. But yeah, in Face of Greed, we've got Emily and her partner. They respond to a home invasion that went horribly wrong. The homeowner's been murdered. The wife is sitting there, and she's been traumatized and a little bit battered by the home invasion. But there's something quite not right about this crime scene when Emily walks in and the mayor is already there, the chief of police is there. So she already knows right away there's this heightened sense of urgency in this case. But she's in her gut, and she does trust her gut. Something's not quite right with this crime, and there's more to this victim than is we're led to believe right away.
Well, you mentioned it's set in Sacramento, and of course, we are here in Northern California and around Sacramento. Neither one of us is actually in Sacramento anymore, but we're close enough. And I work in
Right.
Sacramento, so and I work in the political realm. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a political reporter and have been for many decades now, and I find I'm finding it really interesting from that perspective. Of course, it's a great crime thriller unto itself, but Sacramento is not a setting that a lot of people think of right off the top of their head, with these things. I mean, of course, New Orleans, LA, New York, Chicago, those are all the obvious ones.
Right.
But if you've been around Sacramento politics and policy, which you also have as well from your many years working in the prison system,
Right.
this is as intricate and political a city as there is anywhere in the country. And I've also lived and worked in Washington, D.C., and I'm telling you, the intrigue here is just as great as it was there. We're not
It
as
is.
formal as DC, that I will tell you. We're nowhere near as formal and as rigid on old world policy. Here it's different
Right.
in that regard, but there's just as much skullduggery and backroom bullshit and
There is.
two-faced nonsense as anywhere in the world. And so I find it really fascinating. And so that was the when I as I was, right away when you get into it and you see the mayor is there, you're like, okay, here we go. There's only one reason the mayor would be involved in this, and it ain't any good, right? So
You're right.
so yes,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit though about that. I'm talking.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about why Sacramento actually why people not here might not think of it as a
Right.
perfect locale, but as I just
Yeah.
mentioned,
It
I
it
think it is.
really I think it lends a lot to a crime fiction story. I mean, it's not the first thing that I've written in Sacramento, and I remember the first time I was asked about that was I think at BoucherCon in Toronto, where there's this panel that I'm on, and people are writing about London and Paris and LA and San Francisco, and they look at me like, why Sacramento? It's like, where is this place to begin with? And a lot of people don't know it, but it does for many of the very reasons you mentioned. It makes a great place for crime fiction. The fact that it's a government town and people are coming in and going out, and there's a constant change in characters coming in and going out. People don't know one another, and there's this anonymity behind the scenes that the people just kind of move around in this nameless void, and nobody really knows who anybody is. So in terms of setting a crime fiction there, your antagonist already has this place where he can kind of move around and not be easily noticed. So it's a great place for that kind of thing. But the political intrigue, like you said, it's yeah, it rivals anything that I've seen. Having been in the state capitol and testifying at legislative hearings and all that kind of thing. Yeah, the skullduggery, backstabbing, and the intrigue that goes on in our little state capital rivals anything that I've seen on the national level. So it's a great place to write a fiction story.
Absolutely. I mean, for those who maybe don't know, aren't familiar, just from a geographic standpoint, of course, California is a very, very big state. There's a long-standing rivalry between the North and the South. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
remember growing up with all that stuff about California should be split into two, and there's even been efforts in recent years to try to split California into four or some, which is never
Right.
going to happen, by the way. But a lot of that rivalry plays out in sports, it plays out in other areas, but it really plays out in politics.
It does.
Who's in leadership in the governor's office and the legislature? There's always a big rivalry there. And um, there's a big reason is there's a tremendous amount of money, power, and influence at stake all of the time. And we
Right.
like to say here in California, you hardly go a day without somebody from government claiming, we're the fourth or fifth, depending on what day it is, largest economy in the world. And
Right.
the pipeline between Sacramento and DC is not there's like a catapult. And here, we call it Potomac fever, and it's so true. I mean, there is no California governor that I can think of outside of George Deukmejian in the last 50 years that didn't want to be president. So the and one of them has become, and we have another one right now who I think wants to become president. So the yes, it's easy if you're not here to disregard Sacramento and all of that stuff it brings. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
here, you see it firsthand all of the time. So yes, I
Right.
find it to be a very intriguing setting for a story that is built around intrigue and backstabbing and all the stuff that makes for great crime fiction and thrillers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about how the book has been received. I know you've been getting some really good reviews and
Yeah.
some starred stuff. Tell us a little bit about how the book is doing so far.
Yeah. It seems to be doing really well. I've already sold out the first print run. The publisher had to go back and do a second printing. So, and that was within like 2 to 3 weeks of release. So that's a good sign.
Yes, for those
So I've
uninitiated,
yeah,
that is a great sign.
yeah. So I've at least met the publisher's expectations in that regard. But yeah, some of the trade reviews have been fantastic. Starred Review and Book List, Publishers Weekly gave me just a really great review. The Sun Sentinel with by Oline Cogdell gave me a really warm review down there, and she's one of the great reviewers. Yeah, it's been really well received. It's people are asking about what's next, and there's more in store for Emily. So I'm happy to be here to help that along.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you phrased it that way because I want to talk to you about what might be next for Emily Parker, but also, well, let's start there. As you noted, this is the first in a series. We just have been introduced now to Emily Hunter. What kind of thoughts are you having about the future of this series?
Yeah, there's well, the my editor already has the next in the series. It's called River of Lies. Again, set in Sacramento along the American and Sacramento rivers. And someone is torching the homeless camps along the rivers, chasing the homeless out. And for those who don't know, the homeless issue in Sacramento is huge. I mean, you can't turn a page in the newspaper without some issue about homelessness on the page. But somebody's chasing the people out, and people are dying in the process. So Emily and Javier respond to this case, and they discover that even the homeless have something that someone wants, and so they're trying to figure out what that is and who's behind the burning. And we find a very unlikely victim and an even more unlikely suspect as they go through the investigation.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, yes, and I will, I'll say that the homelessness issue is an issue all along the West Coast. If you've been to Seattle or Portland or any, like obviously San Francisco, LA, it's really a huge issue, but it has become a monstrous issue here. And I mean, literally, I work a couple of blocks from the Capitol, and you cannot walk from my office to the Capitol without passing
Right.
major homeless encampments are on our streets that surround City Hall. It really is a big issue. So, and I'm also glad you noted we are right at the confluence of two major rivers in Northern California, the American and the Sacramento. So, and more actually that feed into those two of
Right.
the river and the Bear and all kinds of things. So, uh, one more reason that's a really great setting here in Sacramento.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that's
I,
great.
yeah.
But you're
And
doing
I just got this morning. I got the proposed cover for River of Lies, and you can be the first to see it if you
oh,
can see it here. It's River of Lies
oh, with
and
the Tower Bridge.
Tower Bridge, and yeah,
Awesome.
it's a little bit. Uh, that's probably better. Yeah, but
I see it.
the glare on the screen. But yeah, I'm really excited about where this next one's going to go to.
Oh, well, that's great. I'm not even through your first one. I'm already getting ready for the second one. That's fabulous.
That's a
Well,
good sign.
one of the things that impresses me so much about your body of work is, you're pretty prolific and in a way um, that's interesting to me because you have these multiple series going on. So I want to reference back the Detective Nathan Parker series, which
Right.
has also been a really big hit between Dead Drop and I think The Devil Within came out in July, correct?
Right. That's right.
So for anyone who may not be familiar with that series, tell us a little bit about the Detective Nathan Parker series.
Yeah, Detective Parker is it's set in the desert Southwest, in the desert just south of Phoenix in Arizona, and it really kind of focuses on the immigration issue, both in Dead Drop and Devil Within. Um, we learned very early on in Dead Drop that Detective Parker's partner was murdered during a coyote run, bringing smugglers over the border, and so it kind of colored his perception of the immigration issue. So he's tracking clues on a current case that he's working there where undocumented migrants are being found dead in the desert. And he follows those clues and he tracks it and attaches that to the man who killed his partner. So he has some feeling of vengeance, and he wants to have some closure for his partner and the family. So he follows those trails, and it leads him over the border, and he actually gets stuck down south. So he needs the undocumented population to help get him home safely. So it changes his perspective a little bit on the immigration issue and the people involved in it. And he meets some folks that kind of change his life, I think, in a good way. But yeah, it focuses on um, you know the immigration issue and who's involved in it and everybody who's touched by that. Um, and I hope that's what I'm bringing in that series.
Well, one of the things that I admire most about that series, aside from it's just a really interesting crime thriller series, is that you take an issue that is a hot, hot, hot button issue.
Right.
If you don't believe me, folks, look at what's going on in Congress right now as we speak. Okay. As you're listening to this, I guarantee you our entire government is being held up right now over immigration disagreements, right?
Right.
Whatever side of
Right.
the issue you're on, it is a reality. But you take this very hot button topic and you handle it with such a I don't want to say light or gentle because that presumes that it's almost like a background issue, but it's not. You really deal with it head on, but
Right.
you have somehow managed to take that issue and deal with it head on without seeming to come down on a side or
Right.
to you don't turn it into a polemic. You don't turn it into anything other than a great backdrop for a very entertaining, interesting, fast-paced story. And so I really encourage folks to check that series out because Jim, it is so well done. I really cannot say enough how well done it is.
Oh, thank you.
Just from that angle alone. I mean, how much and again, I know you worked in the law enforcement arena forever, and we all know a lot of the population in our prison system. We all know about the Mexican cartels and the Mexican mafia and the immigration connection to our prison system.
Right.
Was it a challenge for you to be able to tell this story in a way that you could really be almost neutral on the right, the wrong, the good, the bad? I mean, you got good bad guys, you got bad good guys,
Right.
all that
Right.
stuff. Just
Yeah.
do that a little bit.
Yeah. It was always on my mind. I didn't want the story to come across as I'm co-opting a migrant's story and their experience. That's not my story to tell, but I think I can tell a story around the immigration issue by observing it like Nathan Parker would. I mean, that was kind of the role I had in prison. We had, I think, at one point, 22,000 inmates in California prisons with immigration detainers. That the minute they would parole, we'd, turn them over to immigration authorities, and they'd get bussed off to, wherever their home country was. Um, you talk to some of those guys, and many of them came to prison for issues that they thought they were trying to better their lives and help their families, and they got sucked into this criminal element with the Mexican mafia, smuggling drugs or violence, or they got connected with drugs themselves and were doing crimes to support their habit, kind of thing. But they all had a story and an origin someplace, and it was kind of interesting to hear that. I remember standing in the prison yard in the R.J. Donovan facility, which is it's south of San Diego. And from the yard, you can actually see the international border. I went there for an audit, and an audit, usually is, you're evaluating this other warden's prison, their operation, their security, their, all the things that go on in the prison, their classification. And they usually put their best foot forward at that audit. I got to the prison, and it's a frantic mess. Something's happening at the prison, and it turned out they couldn't clear their count. Now, clearing your count means, you know exactly how many inmates you're supposed to have in the prison and where they're at. That's kind of like one of the basic things you do in prison is know how many inmates you're supposed to have and
Yeah.
keep them. And they couldn't clear their count. And they finally narrowed it down to the minimum facility, which is just outside the walls. And they went through the prison 3 or 4 times until they figured out their count was wrong in the minimum facility, and they had one more inmate there than they were supposed to have. So they went bed by bed, with a photograph, and identified everybody, and they finally found the extra guy, and it turned out to be an undocumented migrant who was so tired and hungry making the journey up over the border that breaking into prison was his best option for a place to sleep and have a warm meal. And something about that stuck with me while I was writing Dead Drop. That the conditions are so horrendous out there, and so dangerous that that's your best option. So it kind of gave that tone a little bit while I was writing the story, and I kind of kept that in my head while I was writing it.
Well, I've had a lot of folks we both know on this show, folks like Baron Bircher and Lou Burney and Eric Pruitt,
Mm-hmm.
folks who've been on the show recently, and I've asked them, or we talked a little bit about this next thing, which is empathy, and I think that's the thing. If I had to put my finger on one thing about that particular series, is you write all of these characters with such a great empathy. And it would be understandable if you didn't, because we all know authors that come from police backgrounds or whatever, and it's very much from that perspective only. You're able to write these particular stories with such a great amount of empathy, and clearly that story you just told showcases maybe how you came to have that perspective on this situation, because I think we want to see these things as black and white, and they're not. They're not black
They're
and white.
not. No, they're not. And I think thanks for that, because I think that's one of the things I tried to do was have Parker and even Emily Hunter as an empathetic character in their stories. I think that helps kind of flesh out a character when you can have those kind of qualities, that they have. And I think you had two good examples there with Baron Bircher and Lou Burney. I mean, they're both really, really good at creating these characters that you really want to spend time with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I was going to ask these two questions a little later, but I'm going to ask them now since we're on process a little bit here. Because any good thriller has a lot of twists that continually ramp up the tension. And I find that to be a real process
Mm-hmm.
in developing a storyline. Because I know my first draft of anything, whether it's a short story or something longer I'm working on, is so damn linear. This, this,
Yeah.
this, this, the end. And
Right.
then I have to go back, and it takes me forever and a lot of long walks with my dogs to work
Yep.
out
Yep.
plot twists in my head and to make the story more interesting and a lot less linear, and etc. How is that process for you?
Yeah. It sounds like it's much the same. I mean, you can still write, and I think I do write a linear story, but it has these places where twists just in my mind have to happen to make the story, to ratchet up the tension a little bit, or change direction or misdirection. Um, and I will, write my first draft, and I'll go back through it, and I need to do something a little differently here. So maybe I'll do this reveal later, or bring it up and move it forward, wherever that tension point needs to be. Um, yeah, it's kind of an organic thing, even though I'm more of a plotter than a pantser. Um, I kind of have this feeling where these tension points and twists need to be, and you'll see that in Face of Greed, but even more so in River of Lies coming up. There's some twists on twists in that one.
And it's a fine line because you need to have enough to make
Right,
the story interesting and, as you say, a little misdirection and keep people's interest.
right.
But if you have too many, it gets confusing and people aren't sure what they're reading anymore. So
Yeah,
really is a
yeah.
balance there, isn't there?
There is, and you don't want to end up with a Lost at the end where everything's been a dream the whole time, or it's like you're going to lose people that way. But no, one of the reviewers recently on Face of Greed said that I threw red herrings like a knife wielder. So it was kind of fun. I like that. I might put that on my epitaph somewhere.
That's a good one. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's a good one. Well, I also I'm curious here because I think most good writers I know, and I emphasize good writers, are by far their own biggest critics.
Oh yeah,
And I emphasize good writers because a lot of bad writers don't self-criticize at all, and that's why they're not really good. You have to
right.
have that, I think, be really self-critical to some extent. That said, you also need to have confidence, right? It's a really most. How long did it take you to get confident in your work? I know we've talked before about the process
Yeah,
from when you started to when you got a contract, all that stuff, and
right.
that's one part of it. But how long did it take you to where you felt really confident that you are doing this and you are good at
I'll let you know. Now, you get a little bit of momentum going, and you kind of look back at when you're stuck in that middle of the book, and that's always the point where I the real second guessing comes in, and like, did I do the right thing? Is this the right story? This is the worst thing ever. All those voices are going on, and then you kind of have to look. You've done this before. You've written books before. You've gotten them out there. They've been they've won awards. They've been received well. You can do it again. So it's kind of that you're still convincing yourself that yeah, this is good, and you still worry that you know is this story fountain ever going to dry up, and you're just pumping a dry well here, and there's nothing that this story that you're writing is ever going to come up with, and you do worry about that. Um, but the fact that you've done it before, it gives you a little bit of confidence that okay, I can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and that's a great thing because, like I say, I think you have to have it because it's the thing. One of the things I've certainly learned in doing this program is that every book is a new experience.
Yep.
Even if you're building on a series or developing a new story that you're really excited about,
Yep.
you it still feels a little bit like you're reinventing the wheel every time. And if you don't think you can do that, it feels overwhelming.
It does, and if you don't feel that sense of magic as you're working through this, you might have lost your spark a little bit. So there has to be that sense of magic and confidence and just excitement about what you're writing. If you're not excited about it as you're throwing this draft out there, maybe the readers aren't going to gravitate to it either. So you've got to make sure that you're happy with it before it goes any further.
I'm curious too about awards. I think um, it really does mean a lot to get nominated for, a Silver Falchion or, any of the great awards that are out there. And I have great respect for that. I I always wonder though, if you've been nominated enough times or you win some of these things, does that add pressure to you as you go forward? Does it help you, hurt you, not mean anything at all?
It's
What's your
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it does help in bringing you some confidence, but it also kind of ups the pressure a little bit. But you've got to at least meet this level again, of quality of book. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, Dead Drop. I had a tremendous year with Dead Drop last year. It was Lefty Anthony Public Safety Award, Silver Falchion nominations, and that may never ever happen again. And that's okay, but it does make that expectation, that plateau, that I've got to ramp up this next book even more to at least meet that threshold again.
yeah,
Because you do want to get back, you do want to climb the mountain again and put your flag up there. But there's that for many reasons that may never ever happen. But you always want to try to make that summit.
right. Well, and that leads into I wanted to ask you about marketing because you're a guy that a lot of people that I talk to will bring up when I ask about how they go about marketing themselves.
Mm,
And I think marketing is a tough one because, and I've
it is.
talked. I was on a panel at Left Coast where, with other people like this that do blogs or podcasts or whatever. And one of the things I was telling people is like, look, if the only time you interact with your audience is to try to get them to buy your book, you need to stop doing that, because as a
Yeah,
reader, it
yeah,
kind of puts me off. I don't want to my only interactions with you to be, hey, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book.
right.
And you have found a way, a whole lots of ways, I find, because you always do like the author speed dating thing, which is great.
Yeah,
But you have other things that I think are so engaging. And one of them I wanted to bring up was not my cat. And I
yeah,
love how in the new book you've worked Not My Cat finally into a story.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, please share a little bit about Not My Cat.
yeah, yeah. Not my cat is. She's been. I'll start it back. Maybe 8 to 10 years ago. Um, I was doing something in the bedroom upstairs, and I walked in the bedroom, and there's this black cat sprawled across the guest room bed, and it's like, one is, how did you get in here, and the other one is, we don't have a cat, so this cat just shows up, and it turns out, the cat's been sneaking in every night and camping out. Goes through the dog door. Our corgis don't like going through the dog door, but this cat has no issue at all about finding her way in. And we'd find her on the couch. We'd find her upstairs in the room. She'd be in the loft upstairs, just sprawled out. And it turns out, she'd been treating the entire neighborhood as like a Vegas buffet, going from house to house to house and sampling, the wares. We tracked it down, and the owners were like four houses down, and this cat just kept coming back. And here we are, 8 to 10 years later, she's still here. Um, she meets me every morning for coffee. We have our little cat and human discussions of what's going on in the world. And yeah, she doesn't venture very far. She kind of stays in our yard, and I think she's sleeping upstairs on the couch right now. But the owners probably moved away 3 or 4 years ago, and they were looking for her. Her name was Case, and we talking to the owners as they were packing up, and they said, we haven't seen Case in 3 months. We don't know what's going on with her. Well, she's asleep at my house right now. If you want to go say hi, and so they kind of agreed. We kind of agreed to a custody arrangement, and we took the cat, but it's still officially not my cat. So she's here.
And
But this thing just blew up. She has her own Twitter account because of the bird logo. She liked that. So she was doing, that kind of stuff. But people became so, enamored with this cat that at conferences, I would take a little stuffed black cat, and people were clamoring to take photos with Not My Cat. So I have photographs of, all kinds of author friends with Not My Cat, Lori Rader Day and Gabriel Valjean, Walter Mosley, with Not My Cat. He looked less impressed, I must admit. But
he always
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's been this thing, and she has probably been one of the best unintentional marketing things ever. So it's been fun. But yeah, she finally got her turn in the book, so she's a character in Face of Greed.
Well, I love that. I absolutely love the fact, because again, it's a thing that I preach a lot to folks. Find ways to engage with people on a somewhat personal level, because I think we all want that. And with
Yeah,
so much competition out there, so in this day and age in particular, where self-publication is no longer a horrible faux pas,
right, right.
now there's so many books out there, and you're just fighting
Hmm.
for attention to get anybody to even know who you are. To
Right,
have something that engages a broad swath of the public in a way that's different from everybody else, I think
right.
is a brilliant thing. So good on you for doing that, recognizing it, and having fun with it, because it is
Having
fun.
fun.
It's a fun
Yeah,
thing.
you do. You have to have fun with it, and like you said, the last thing you want to do is hammer people with these buy messages, and I'm always afraid that I cross that line, especially in the month or two after a book release or around a book release, because there's going to be a lot of stuff, reviews and appearances and all that kind of thing that you're going to want to put out there on social media, and you always wonder, is this the one that's going to tip the balance and people are just going to start ignoring it? And yeah, you're always kind of aware of that.
Well, I like the way you do it because you, as an example on Facebook, you'll have a mention of a nomination or a good review or something, but you never overtly say, come buy my book. And I
Right.
think that's the difference. I think for a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
folks, uh, everything ends with, buy my book, buy my book. And look, I get it. I know the ad is because you want me to buy your book, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
I don't know. I'm a harder sell than others for than a lot of folks, but I think the way you do it is a model for how a
Okay.
lot of writers could go about it, and I think build a long-term readership as opposed to maybe selling a single book. That's just
Yeah,
my not
that's
my
true.
2 cents there. I think that's something that you're very, very good at, and I would encourage anyone thinking about it, how to manage their marketing to maybe to take a look at how you do it. I think it would be.
Oh, thank you.
Um, Wanted to ask you too about the industry because we always talk about how the industry changes, and my God, it seems like it
Right.
turns over every year in one way or another. The big thing this year, in the last few years actually, and I think this one's going to be an issue for a while, is the use of artificial intelligence.
Right. Right.
Um, Now, I've had some authors on my show, Neil Plaxey and Alyssa Lorello, that use artificial intelligence a lot to help them in various ways, not to write stories, but to help them manage their time or to manage their story ideas and et cetera, et cetera. There are many other writers out there who absolutely loathe the idea of artificial intelligence in any
Right.
form whatsoever. And they probably have reason to when we've seen some of the scam kind of
Right.
things that are out there. Um, where do you fall in this regard? Do you use it at all? Are you concerned about it? Do you have any fear of it, embrace of it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it poses a threat to the author community because I know that AI is going to get better and better and better. And so that somebody in a dark room could say, write me a story about, a serial killer in Sacramento, and this thing will spit out this book. Um, I'd be very surprised if we didn't end up down that road if we're not very, very careful. Um, the last couple of years, I've taught a session at Craft Fest, at Thriller Fest, with Neil Nyren. Neil is a wonderful guy. He's a former head publisher at Putnam. Has known more about the editorial game and acquisitions than anybody will ever know. And we do a thing called first page critiques, where people mail in their first pages to us through Thriller Fest, and we pick a dozen or so and put them up on a screen, and we basically critique them. How it could, how the author could have done something different, or you've lost the tone, or you've mischaracterized the setting. But I slipped one in this last year on Neil. I didn't even tell him. I generated a story through AI, through Chat GTP. And I said, write a story in the fashion of James Patterson, and it spit out the parameters that I gave it, so many hundred words, and it was a story, grammatically correct. So when we put it up on the screen, we had the audience look at it. Nobody liked it, and Neil had looked at it. He had it ahead of time, and the reason nobody liked it is there was no emotion in that piece. There was no emotional connection to the characters. The characters didn't feel or have any empathy, like we talked about, earlier. There was something missing in this Chat GTP generated piece that the other, human authors, had been able to capture. Now, my fear is that AI is going to learn and get better and be able to imitate some of that.
It will.
But yeah, that's kind of where it is now, and it's something that I'm aware of, and I'm looking at, where it's going to impact the publishing industry. But yeah, I try not to use it. I've looked at it for generating, like social media, hit lines, that kind of thing. But I've never really even used it for that. Just I did it just to see what it would spit back.
It's interesting. I did something similar as a test for myself because I actually in preparing to talk to people about it in particular, um, I tried several story prompts and said, okay, story about this.
Mhm.
Give me 10 story ideas with this as a prompt. And yeah, it'll spit them out. I didn't see a lot of great variety in them, and a lot of them to me were
Correct.
tropes. And well, because obviously it's only knows what it's been told, right? So
Right.
tropes are all things that are familiar because that's what's out there, right? So I don't get a lot of originality out of that, but I do think it's learning, and I think
Yeah.
yeah, where it's at right now and where it's going to be even a year or 5 years, 10 years from now is kind of scary. And we saw what was going on with the actors and writers strikes down in Southern California. I mean, that was so much about what they were
Right.
holding fast about was the use of their imagery, their names or likenesses. It's a little bit scary for
It
creative
is.
people because it does feel like um, the creativity that's missing in it now is going to be built into it at some point.
Yep.
And it does make you think, wow. And to me, I've been a baseball fan my whole life, and to me, it's a little bit like the overwhelming use of analytics in baseball over the last 20 years. I mean, we've all heard of Moneyball and
Hmm.
Billy Beane and Bill James and all these people. And I had this argument with my baseball friends, um, because to me, the old the kind of blind dedication to these new metrics to me takes the heart out of the game. I played
Yeah.
baseball all the way into college, so for me, it's like, look, it feels to me so much like the guys who are so slavishly addicted to this have never actually been on a team. You've never
Hmm.
actually played. You you cannot know what, when Dusty Baker had to make out a lineup, he's the only one who knows was his second baseman out all night carousing,
Right.
is
Right.
is the catcher going through some kind of marital difficulty? Look, I remember in one of John Madden's books, he talked about, they would go and they would have these conversations with coaches for both teams to prepare for the big game that he and Pat Summerall would call. And you can look this up. In one of his books, he talked about a coach blurting out in one of these meetings that a huge number of his players had all been sleeping with the same woman, and like 2 dozen of them had caught a social disease.
Jeez.
Well, Corey, you're not going to work that into the broadcast, of course, but he said that's the kind of thing the coach needs to know. He's the only one who knows that. Why is XYZ performer or player doing what they're doing? Well, okay, sure, maybe their long history says, they don't hit left-handers or this particular left-hander well, but there may be something else going on here,
Maybe
right?
something else going on. Yeah.
You can't take the human element out of everything.
Right.
We've been
Right.
talking about this since A Clockwork Orange came out
Yeah.
in whatever 1950. That's the part
Yeah.
that scares me. We are not clockworks. We're not machines.
No.
But
No. You can imitate it, and I think that's what it's doing. It's kind of mouthing back the words, but there's still that emotional underpinning that's missing from AI. But yeah, it's going to get better and better, I think.
well, I only have a couple more here, but this one I really want to touch on because I've heard we've talked about it a little bit before, and I've heard you talk about it other places too. Because I know the agenting process is one that scares the hell out of most writers, and it probably
Right.
should. It
Right.
shouldn't scare you. It should actually motivate you. You and I
Yeah.
actually have the same agent now, so
Hmm.
I say this with that knowledge, full disclosure. But you've said some interesting things in the past about your elevator pitch. We
Right.
always think about an elevator pitch in all these ways, but it's really important to have one when you're going to talk to an agent. If you're going to, now that everyone's going back to conferences again and back in that process a little bit, tell me a little bit about the process you use to develop an elevator pitch that you
Yeah.
use for an agent.
Yeah. You've got to kind of distill your book down. This 300 to 400 page, tome that you've toiled over for the last year or whatever, and distill it down to like 2 sentences, because that's about all the time you're going to have when you pitch to an agent. At Thriller Fest, we do a thing called Pitch Fest, where it's a room full of agents. I think last year we had probably 45 to 50 agents, and authors were pitching for a couple of hours, and all they had time for it's like 2 minutes a shot, and you get you give them your elevator pitch, and they might say, that's not my thing. It's not what I'm looking for. It's not the kind of thing I carry, which tells me that you didn't do the research ahead of time to know what agents you're targeting. Do they represent your kind of book? But it also, they were, I think a lot of people got requests for partial manuscripts and a few full manuscripts out of that pitch fest, and it all came down to being prepared, knowing what your book is, and being able to talk about it. But really, what the agents are looking for, especially at Pitch Fest, is you. They want to know who you are, why this book, why do you're the only one who could have written this book, and the other thing they look for is, are you a crazy person? Can I work? Can I work with you? If we go into a business relationship, are you somebody that I can work with? And God bless them. There's a lot of authors that would be difficult business partners out there, and they're the authors that haven't been published yet. They haven't seen enough of the industry yet, and they're not sure how it works, and it really is kind of a two-way relationship that you have to be successful.
Well, and I noted this earlier, and I hope everybody caught the emphasis that I put on good writers are often their most harsh critic. And what I mean by that is they're the most willing to look with a critical eye at their own work. They're willing to do what you were just talking about, do the homework on an agent or a publisher that matches what they're doing. They understand that in a lot of ways, I always describe this, I apologize, I know people heard me say this a million times. You're literally trying to hit a moving target from 500 yards with a blow dart. That is what it's like in this day and age, because the competition is intense. And if an agent says no to you, it doesn't mean you suck and everything about you is horrible and your entire lineage should disappear from the face of the earth. It means that the thing that you've done does not fit the thing that I need. It's
Right.
a product. We are creating a product that is a creative work, and that's a very subjective thing. And that's why I think, good writers will just go back to the drawing board and keep writing. Keep refining, keep editing, keep it the process, keep working until they find the one that matches. Bad
Yeah.
writers blame the agent, they blame the industry, they blame everybody else
But themselves.
to get improved. Yeah, they
And
never look in
and
the
it
mirror.
part of it, even defending some of the aspiring and younger authors, it's you don't know what you don't know yet.
Right.
And this industry is so different, and it moves quickly until it doesn't. I mean, all the things with pitching and all that stuff, it's frantic and high paced, and then you get into that query loop, and time stops.
Yeah.
And it takes time to get something through the system. But one of the things that helped me, get my elevator pitch down was I attended the Book Passage Mystery Writers Conference, years ago, and we sat at the table over lunch, and it was with Kara Black. Kara's got a very successful series, that she's had running for years and years, and we all just took turns practicing our pitch with Kara. And she was able to say, cut this down, or talk about this, or emphasize that, and it really kind of helped everybody hone their pitch for the book that they were talking about. So, and that's another kind of goes to another point. This crime fiction community is so supportive and helpful that someone like Kara would take the time to spend with other authors and just help them create their pitch. It's not a competitive thing. We want to see everybody succeed, and that's one of the things I really appreciate and didn't expect when I got into this business.
Yeah, I absolutely echo that. I mean, wherever you're at on your path as a writer in the crime fiction world, I've never in my life seen a more supportive group of people than fellow authors. I don't know if it's like this in romance or anything because I don't write any of that stuff,
Oh,
but crime fiction, I have never seen a more supportive group of people who truly understand that your success doesn't diminish their success. It feels
right.
like in a lot of industries, the people are so afraid that if you're successful, it'll somehow take away from them. I have never seen that with crime authors. Everybody is
That's true.
so willing to share thoughts, helpful stuff, tips, whatever. I've had more people introduce me to their agent. It's amazing how that works. So um, kudos to everybody in it. I mean that sincerely. Jim, as you know, I always like to end on a fun question. But again, I hope is a fun question. Certainly intend for it to be a fun question. I put you through this a few times now, but I haven't come up with a better way to end the show, so I'm gonna
So
do
we're
it
going to do it.
again.
Okay.
This is the triple option here. I have the omniscient power to put you together with any one of the following three people.
Okay.
You pick who you would want to spend a little time with, maybe have a good double bourbon on ice with,
Okay.
or whatever. The options I'm going to give you, and I hope I haven't given you one of these before, but I don't think I have. The options, and there's a theme. I finally got smart now. There's a real theme with all these things.
There's theme. Okay.
The options for you today are the outlaw Butch Cassidy, uh, Alan Pinkerton, the great detective agency
Uh-huh.
founder, and the early 19th or 20th century American prison reformer Samuel June Barrows. I can put you together with one of those three people. Who would you?
I think Pinkerton would probably be the most interesting character to deal with. Was at the time he was doing his, the Pinkerton detective stuff. That was kind of a new thing. You had this private force out there that was kind of supplementing, what the local law enforcement can do and chasing bank robbers and that kind of stuff. So that would be kind of interesting. And there's another kind of a personal tag to it. Is right after my dad left the Navy after World War II, he kind of joined the Pinkerton Detective Agency for just a hot tick before he went to the prison system. So there's kind of a connection there that I think might be fun.
Well, that's a great reason to make that choice. Kudos. Well, Jim, thanks again for coming on the show. As you know, it's an open invitation for you to come on whenever. I'm sure the next best-selling book you put out there, we'll come back and talk about
Yeah,
that one too. That's
hope
always
so.
great. I know every time you're on, you share stuff that any aspiring author or even currently successful author should find really helpful to them in their career. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming on and doing this. I will remind everybody once again, if you would be so kind, please hit subscribe. Please leave a good review. 5 stars, just like five fingers, easy to remember. It really does help people find the show. If you know folks, if you're an aspiring writer or you know folks who are, look, folks, I don't make any money doing this. I'm doing this because this is my part of trying to help out the community too, and folks like Jim. And it's just fun. I hope you're having fun because I have fun talking to so many of these great writers. They're a great inspiration to me. And I hope they're an inspiration to you. So please hit subscribe, leave a nice review, and hopefully help others find the show. I'll leave you with one other thing. Just I always say this, but I'm it's a little more personal to me this time. Lost a really dear friend a week ago, very suddenly, very unexpectedly. And I'm not going to lie, it's been a tough couple of weeks here around our household. Um, but it really does hammer home the thing that I always tell you, which is tomorrow is not promised to anybody. So please make today count. So for myself, Rich Eisen, for my good friend Jim Latwell, for his crazy corgis, for my crazy English setters who are all off camera somewhere, except maybe one is behind me there, and for anyone else out there who enjoys the show. This has been the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words. We will see you next episode. Until then, take care.
Thank you, Rich. Take care.